Listen carefully, because this story does not start with a collapse. It starts with tension that had been quietly simmering for weeks, the kind of tension you can feel through a screen. Subtle digs. Carefully worded posts. Side eyes disguised as professionalism. Candace Owens and Erika Kirk were circling each other publicly, and everyone online knew it was only a matter of time before something exploded. When news broke that they had finally agreed to meet privately, people genuinely believed this was the calm before resolution. The internet exhaled, thinking this chapter would finally close. That belief did not last long. Just hours after that private, off-the-record meeting ended, Candace Owens reportedly suffered a sudden medical emergency and collapsed. No warning. No build-up. Just a sharp, terrifying turn that instantly sent shockwaves across social media. Timelines flooded with disbelief, confusion, and one question repeated again and again: how does something like this happen immediately after a closed-door conversation? The timing alone felt unsettling, and the internet does what it always does best. It started connecting dots. Behind the scenes, what was supposed to be a calm, grown-up conversation reportedly spiraled into something deeply uncomfortable. According to multiple whispers from people close to the situation, Candace did not show up to play nice. She allegedly began pressing Erika with questions that were sharp, personal, and impossible to dodge. Questions that shifted the power dynamic in the room. Questions that reportedly made Erika visibly uneasy. The kind of questions that do not just challenge narratives, but threaten to expose them. As more details leaked, the tone online shifted from concern to suspicion. This no longer felt like coincidence to many observers. Comment sections exploded with words like silencing, pressure, and something is being hidden. People began replaying every past interaction, every tweet, every subtle jab, reanalyzing them with a darker lens. What once looked like petty online beef suddenly felt like the surface of something far more dangerous. What makes this even more disturbing is how carefully everything had been framed beforehand. Both sides publicly presented this meeting as a mature step forward. Erika took to X, announcing that she and Candace would meet privately, emphasizing that all public discourse would be paused until after the conversation. It sounded diplomatic. It sounded controlled. It sounded safe. But now, looking back, people are asking whether that pause was meant to protect peace or suppress fallout. Social media reactions have been ruthless and relentless. Some users express genuine fear for Candace's well-being, while others question why the meeting was private at all. Many are accusing Erika of knowing more than she is saying. Others believe Candace walked into a situation she underestimated. And then there are those who think this entire situation is just the beginning of a much bigger unraveling. One thing is clear: whatever conflict exists between Candace Owens and Erika Kirk has officially crossed into a new territory. This is no longer just about online disagreements or ideological clashes. This feels personal. This feels volatile. And after what happened next, the internet is no longer watching casually. It is watching closely, suspiciously, and with the growing belief that the truth behind that closed-door meeting has not come out yet. Candace did respond, and on the surface, her reply sounded calm, composed, even hopeful. She said she was looking forward to the conversation, signaling maturity and closure, the kind of statement that usually means the drama is finally about to die down. For a brief moment, people believed this was two adults choosing peace over chaos. But that illusion cracked almost immediately, because despite the polite tone, the storm never actually stopped. It only went quiet. The meeting happened. 4.5 hours behind closed doors. And when Candace finally spoke afterward, she described it as very productive. Those words should have settled everything, but instead, they ignited suspicion. Fans noticed something almost instantly that felt wrong in their gut. Candace did not post her update right away. Not within minutes. Not within hours. Almost an entire day passed. And if you know Candace, you know she does not move like that. She is known for reacting fast, posting fast, and speaking while the heat is still burning. This delay felt unnatural, like someone pressing pause on her voice. That is when the internet started whispering. People began saying the update did not even sound like her. One viral post flat-out claimed that something had been done to Candace, pointing out that the tone felt restrained, filtered, almost foreign. And while all of this speculation was spreading, what made it even stranger was the silence from Kenneth. He had suddenly become hesitant, guarded, and unusually tight-lipped about what actually happened during that meeting. For someone who never hesitated to spill every detail before, this sudden restraint only fueled the fire. As the theory snowballed, many people assumed Candace had been pressured or threatened into silence. That alone was disturbing enough. But then everything escalated in the worst possible way. Photos leaked. Real ones. Images showing Candace being carried into an ambulance. No commentary. No explanation. Just visual proof that something had gone very wrong. According to the insider who leaked the images, Candace suffered a sudden and unexplained medical emergency just hours after her meeting with Erika Kirk. Hours. Not days. Not weeks. Hours. And that is where the story turns genuinely chilling. The same insider claimed that it was Erika who initially reached out to Candace to fix the situation. At first, that sounded reasonable. Almost generous. Until more details emerged. Allegedly, Candace wanted the meeting to happen on neutral ground, a space that did not belong to either of them. But Erika reportedly pushed back, insisting on a location she personally chose. Candace agreed, apparently as a gesture of good faith. And not long after leaving that meeting, she collapsed. People online did not hesitate to say what others were thinking but were too afraid to voice. The word plot started circulating. Comparisons were made. And while that may sound extreme, many pointed out that the timing, the secrecy, and the sudden health crisis created a pattern that was hard to ignore. Especially when you consider that Candace had already been publicly claiming she was getting closer to uncovering the truth behind Charlie's death. That context changed everything. If you have been watching the dynamic between Erika and Candace since Charlie passed, you know this tension did not appear overnight. Candace had been signaling danger from the very beginning. She once claimed that she avoided Charlie's funeral because she had information suggesting her life could be at risk. That statement alone raised eyebrows. Soon after, she began throwing subtle shade in Erika's direction, implying that Erika might have been connected to the same shadowy forces responsible for her husband's death. But here is where it gets complicated. Right after those implications, Candace flipped the script publicly. She started posting praise. Carefully worded admiration. She applauded Erika's strength, her forgiveness, her faith. She spoke about the courage it takes to stand on a stage and forgive someone who caused unimaginable pain. To the casual observer, it sounded sincere. Even graceful. Many people believed Candace was extending an olive branch, choosing compassion over conflict. Yet in hindsight, those words feel layered. Almost strategic. Like someone throwing flowers over landmines. Because beneath that reverent tone, the suspicion never truly disappeared. And now, with an unexplained medical emergency, leaked ambulance photos, and a meeting that may have changed everything, people are asking whether that praise was genuine admiration or the calm before something far darker revealed itself. But that grace did not last. Almost without warning, the tone began to rot from the inside out. What once sounded like admiration slowly curdled into something sharper, colder, and unmistakably calculated. The compliments stopped feeling like praise and started sounding like positioning, as if Candace was no longer uplifting Erika but subtly standing above her. What had been framed as empathy began to feel performative, and the audience could sense it. Something was off. The warmth disappeared, replaced by words that carried teeth. Day after day, the shift became more obvious. The language grew bolder, less restrained, no longer cloaked in kindness. Subtle hints turned into pointed remarks, and the mask slipped just enough for people to notice. What once felt like grace now looked like strategy. It became clear to many that the initial compassion may have only been a setup, a soft opening before something far more aggressive took center stage. As the shading escalated, social media did what it always does when ambiguity meets influence. It turned into chaos. Comment sections became courtrooms with no judges, no evidence standards, and no mercy. Every vague remark was treated like a confession. Every pause was interpreted as confirmation. Erika's name stopped being mentioned with curiosity and started being hurled with anger, as though the crowd had been waiting for permission to unload everything they were already thinking. Then the rhetoric crossed a line. Not gradually. Violently. People stopped speculating and started accusing. Claims appeared that were not just reckless but deeply disturbing, framed with the confidence of people who believed they were exposing a hidden truth. One comment would ignite 10 more, each more extreme, each more detached from reality. Erika was accused of manipulation, of betrayal, of being part of something dark and orchestrated. These were not whispers anymore. They were declarations. What made it terrifying was not just what was being said, but how quickly it spread. There was no moment where the crowd hesitated. No collective realization that this had gone too far. Instead, repetition turned rumor into perceived fact. The louder it got, the more justified people felt. And through all of this, Candace said nothing that mattered. She did not step in. She did not draw a boundary. She did not tell her audience to stop. That silence did not feel neutral. It felt loaded. In fact, rather than de-escalating, she continued to pour gasoline on the fire. Cryptic posts appeared, vague enough to deny responsibility but specific enough to feed suspicion. Podcast comments followed the same pattern. No direct accusations, no explicit claims, just carefully placed suggestions that invited listeners to reach their own conclusions. It was rhetorical manipulation at its finest, planting ideas without owning them. With every post, every episode, the narrative hardened. Erika was no longer seen as a grieving widow or a woman navigating faith under unbearable pressure. She was recast as a villain in a story she never agreed to be part of. Nuance vanished. Context died. All that remained was a character shaped by outrage, stripped of humanity, reduced to whatever role best served the spectacle. Then the discourse sank even lower. A new theory emerged, uglier and more invasive than the rest. Some people began claiming that Candace's fixation was personal, that it was rooted in jealousy rather than ideology. They speculated that Candace harbored feelings for Charlie, that her hostility toward Erika came from resentment over what Erika represented. Whether this theory had any basis did not matter. It spread because it was sensational. It spread because it simplified complexity into a cheap emotional motive. And still, there was no intervention. No condemnation. No effort to pull the conversation back from the edge. The absence of restraint was interpreted as approval. The crowd took it as permission to keep digging, keep accusing, keep destroying. Outrage became currency, and the most shocking claim always won. What makes this entire situation so dangerous is how moral language was twisted into a weapon. Forgiveness became suspicious. Faith became evidence. Strength became something to dissect rather than respect. The very qualities that were once praised were later used to justify cruelty. Erika's refusal to perform grief the way the internet demanded was turned against her. Her silence was treated as guilt. Her humanity was erased. By the end, this was no longer about truth. It was about power. About who controls the narrative and who gets sacrificed for engagement. Candace's platform amplified everything, and with that amplification came consequences she never publicly acknowledged. By speaking in ways that inflamed speculation while refusing to shut down harassment, she allowed a mob to form under the illusion of righteousness. And somewhere in the noise, the real story disappeared. Real grief. Real faith. Real people. Erika stopped being seen as a human being and became a symbol, a vessel for collective suspicion. The tragedy is not just that rumors spread. It is that empathy vanished entirely, replaced by spectacle, cruelty, and the dangerous thrill of tearing someone apart in the name of truth. And that, more than anything else, is what exposes the true fault line in this entire saga. This was never just a disagreement between two strong personalities or a clash of opposing worldviews. It was a case study in how quickly compassion can evaporate when influence is wielded recklessly. What began as praise quietly mutated into shade. Shade hardened into accusation. Accusation escalated into dehumanization. And while some people brushed it off as harmless commentary or internet noise, the psychological and reputational damage unfolding in real time was undeniable. As for the deeper motives behind Candace's behavior, the unresolved resentment, the unanswered questions lurking beneath the surface, many were quick to say that reckoning would come later. Another chapter. Another day. To Erika's credit, she genuinely tried to take the high road in the beginning. For weeks, she stayed in her lane. She did not engage in cryptic subtweets. She did not fire back with vague quotes or passive-aggressive posts. She did not mobilize her followers or perform outrage for sympathy. From the outside, it looked like restraint. Like someone who understood that responding would only magnify a fire she never lit. Candace, meanwhile, remained present in the background, an unspoken tension hovering over everything. Erika appeared determined to ignore it, and for a while, that silence worked. Silence can be powerful when the other side is waiting for a reaction. It can make attacks look one-sided, petty, unhinged. And for a moment, that is exactly how it felt. Until it did not. Because just days ago, the tone shifted dramatically. Candace went on her podcast and crossed an invisible line that had been holding everything together. These were no longer abstract critiques or general observations. They were specific. Directed. Impossible to misinterpret. The restraint vanished. The gloves came off. And suddenly, Erika was no longer dealing with murmurs or implication. She was being confronted publicly, in front of an audience numbering in the thousands, all forming conclusions in real time. At that point, silence stopped being a strategy. It became a liability. Now, to be clear, not everything Candace said was entirely baseless. The video of Erika standing beside Charlie's corpse unsettled many people, even those without emotional investment in the situation. It felt uncomfortable. Awkward. Unnecessary in a way that raised legitimate questions about boundaries and judgment. There was a real conversation to be had there. But the issue was never just the critique. It was the delivery. The tone was sharp. The dragging was excessive. The intent felt less like concern and more like provocation. There is a line between questioning behavior and publicly humiliating someone, and Candace crossed it with precision. That was the moment it became undeniable. Candace was no longer interested in pretending there was no conflict. The pleasantries disappeared. The coded language evaporated. Without ever saying it outright, she made it clear that there was real beef. Personal beef. And she was done hiding it. Until then, most of Candace's commentary had been aimed at systems rather than individuals. She spoke about institutions, about money trails, about power structures operating behind closed doors. She criticized organizations and wealthy donors, suggesting they exerted influence over Charlie's beliefs and public stances. That framing allowed her to position herself as a whistleblower rather than an aggressor. But the moment she began naming Erika directly, that narrative collapsed. This was no longer abstract. Candace stopped talking about people close to Charlie and started questioning Erika herself. Her motives. Her silence. Her role in what Candace implied was a deliberate cover-up. She asked publicly why Erika had not demanded transparency. Why she seemed comfortable letting certain questions remain unanswered. Those are not neutral questions. Once asked in front of an audience, they linger. They attach. They follow. Then came the insider claim that had been quietly circulating for weeks. The allegation that Erika refused to meet Candace on neutral ground. At first, it sounded like just another rumor, the kind that thrives online without substance. But as more context surfaced, it became harder to dismiss. This was not sudden. This was not impulsive. This had been building long before the public realized there was even tension. People began revisiting moments that once seemed insignificant. Like when the producer behind Charlie's show publicly invited Candace to appear. On the surface, it looked like openness. An olive branch. A chance to clear the air. But there was a catch. The conversation had to happen face to face. In Phoenix. No remote option. No neutral location. Phoenix or nothing. Candace declined, and at the time, many supported her decision. Why should she travel across the country to confront people on their own turf, under their control? It felt less like dialogue and more like a power play. And for a while, the story stalled there. Until more details emerged. According to Candace, Erika herself had pushed for that setup. Not directly, but through intermediaries. She allegedly used the producer as a messenger instead of being transparent herself. That detail reframed everything. What once looked like an invitation began to resemble orchestration. Strategy. Control. And that is when the questions got uncomfortable. Why the insistence on Phoenix? Why the refusal to meet on equal footing? Why the need to dictate the environment so precisely? People confident in their truth do not usually require that many conditions. The fixation on control made it feel less like conversation and more like a trap waiting to snap shut. Erika, understandably, did not appreciate being called out. No one would. Especially not publicly. Especially not while grieving. But instead of addressing the concerns directly, it appeared that the response happened behind the scenes. Shifting terrain. Regaining leverage. That is where the optics turned murky. Because if transparency was the real goal, neutral ground would have strengthened credibility, not weakened it. An open forum would have protected everyone involved. The apparent resistance to that only fed Candace's narrative. Every refusal became circumstantial evidence.